This is Deep Time Detective, and today we're solving a mystery: drowned subcontinents.
I want you to just imagine for a second standing on the shoreline of a modern coastal city, maybe London or Sydney. Now, picture the ocean water suddenly draining away, completely revealing these vast emerald green plains and winding river valleys right where the deep blue used to be. You see, you've never actually experienced true permanence. Today, we're opening up a planetary-scale cold case. We're going to read the record written in stone, sediment, and ancient memory to investigate the literal erasure of entire worlds. Think about the globe we all know. 7 continents, neatly separated by vast oceans, right? Well, what if I told you that map is basically a temporary lie? Just 12,000 years ago, the world was a fundamentally different place. The English Channel? It didn't exist. You could have walked directly from London to Paris or Amsterdam. And I don't mean through a concrete tunnel, but across this vast, fertile plain, totally alive with forests and rivers. And on the exact opposite side of the planet, you could have journeyed from the northern tip of Australia all the way up to the mountains of New Guinea without ever once needing to board a ship.
400. I really want you to take a moment and let that number sink in. Because 20,000 years ago, at the absolute peak of the last ice age, global sea levels weren't just a few inches lower, they were up to 300 to 400 feet lower than they are today. That is massive. Where modern ships are currently sailing over deep blue water, there were once these thriving, dry-land heartlands of human innovation. We aren't just talking about narrow little land bridges here. We're talking about massive, thriving subcontinents.
Section 1. Witnesses to the drowning. Okay, let's dive into this.
To solve a cold case of this absolute magnitude, we really have to rely on forensic science to reconstruct these completely erased landscapes. And our primary witnesses, they're actually invisible to the naked eye. Meet the Foraminifera. These are microscopic, single-celled organisms that live out in the ocean and build these tiny little shells out of calcium carbonate. Think of them as the deep-time paleo-thermometers of our planet. When these organisms die, their shells sink right down to the seafloor and just pile up over millennia. Layer by layer, they create this impeccable microscopic chemical archive of Earth's entire climate history.
So the crucial point is exactly how we read that chemical archive, and it all comes down to oxygen isotopes. Inside those microscopic shells, oxygen exists in 2 stable forms. You've got your light, oxygen-16, and your heavy, oxygen-18. Now, during the Ice Age, massive glaciers, some of them literally 2 miles thick, grew across the northern continents. And because it's lighter, oxygen-16 basically evaporated and got totally locked away in those colossal ice sheets. That left the oceans highly enriched in the heavier oxygen-18. So by measuring this exact ratio, which is known as the delta O18, our deep time detectives can calculate precisely how much water was locked in ice and exactly how far the sea levels had fallen. The evidence is just completely unambiguous.
Section 2. The victims. Doggerland and Sahul.
As the hydrological cycle was literally drained, these vast continental shelves were exposed, giving birth to 2 massive subcontinents. Let's look first at Europe's hidden heart, Doggerland. 12,000 years ago, the North Sea was this vast mammoth steppe. It was an incredible mosaic of lagoons, marshes, and river valleys, arguably the absolute prime real estate of the Mesolithic era, supporting some of the largest mammals to ever walk the Earth. And the crazy thing is, we're actively finding the remains of this lost world today. Modern Dutch and British trawlers, operating 130 meters above the seafloor, consistently dredge up the calling cards of this lost culture. Right from their fishing nets, they pull up the bones of mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant deer, and, most hauntingly, actual human stone tools and harpoons. It's literally debris from a world that vanished roughly 800 generations ago.
300. Now, while Doggerland was the center of Europe, Sahul was the absolute giant of the southern hemisphere. 20,000 years ago, Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania were all completely welded together into a single, massive landmass. And here, the evidence of the drowning hasn't just been preserved in mud and sediment, it's actually been preserved in human memory for an astounding 300 generations.
And this brilliantly illustrates the 2 totally different types of forensics we have for this era. In Europe, Doggerland gives us physical bones and stone tools dredged up from the dark, cold waters of the North Sea. But in Sahul, Aboriginal oral traditions actually preserve geographically accurate stories of a time when the sea rose and drowned the coastal lands. Archaeologists mapping the drowned landscape of places like the Spencer Gulf found that these stories, passed down for over 7,000 years, describe specific islands that were once mountain peaks. It's a true forensic anomaly, really. It's the memory of a slow-motion catastrophe watched generation by generation until the entire map was unrecognizable.
Section 3. The Meltwater Pulse Murder.
So how exactly did these vibrant landmasses meet their end? Well, if they were murdered by the climate, the weapon was a violent planetary-scale upheaval. Just look at this timeline of erasure. We start 20,000 years ago at the peak of the Ice Age. Everything is completely locked in ice. But 14,000 years ago, a slight shift in Earth's orbit changed how sunlight actually hit the planet. And this wasn't just some gentle, gradual melting. It triggered a series of violent geological pulses. By 12,000 years ago, Doggerland vanishes entirely. And by 7,000 years ago, the mountain peaks of Sahul become fully submerged islands.
The weapon in this cold case is what geologists call the meltwater pulse. It was a completely deadly feedback loop. As the climate warmed from that orbital shift, mountain-sized ice dams that were holding back these massive glacial lakes began to fail. When lakes like Lake Agassiz breached, they released floods so unbelievably huge they held thousands of cubic miles of water, which completely disrupted the entire ocean circulation system. In a geological eye blink, the sea didn't just slowly rise, it violently surged. We are talking about sea levels leaping by several meters in the span of a single human lifetime. For the inhabitants of Doggerland, the final killing blow may have literally arrived in a single afternoon. As the waters rose and the ice retreated, the newly shifting Earth's crust triggered the Storga slide. This was a massive underwater landslide off the coast of Norway. This single event unleashed a terrifying mega tsunami, sending a towering wall of water racing across the low-lying North Sea plains and violently drowning the last remnants of the European subcontinent in a matter of mere hours.
Section 4. Legacy of the Survivors.
This perfect storm of extinction erased 35 types of giant animals and forced human populations into tiny, desperate refuges. But it didn't erase humanity. The people who survived were the adaptable, the resilient, and honestly, the lucky. You are the genetic legacy of those survivors, and if there is one absolutely crucial takeaway from their story, it's this. Dominance is an illusion. Permanence is a fantasy. We've built our entire modern civilization on the very fragile assumption that our coastlines are fixed, but the Holocene, the last 11,700 years of climate stability that we've enjoyed, is really just a temporary interlude.
We are part of a 4-billion-year narrative of resilience, basically carrying the fire of those who watched their entire world drown and refused to let humanity fade. The rocks and the shells remember that the ocean is a restless giant. But it leaves us with one echoing question. When the interlude ends and the water inevitably rises again, what will the deep-time detectives of the future discover about us? Keep that perspective in mind the next time you look at a map. Thanks for exploring the drowned world with me today.
If you enjoyed this journey through deep time, like, share, and subscribe, and join us